building community through amplifying the voices and vision of innovative educational leaders, practitioners, and learners from South Africa.
Ifikile imini enkulu. Welcome to JGF Amplified. It is 2023. Happy New Year, Betuna. We are back. And we are back as the leading education podcast in South Africa. And this is all made possible because of your engagement. And in the spirit of engagement, we all know, we are here engaging experts, learners, teachers who influence and impact the state of education here in South Africa. And I am with Luna August and Letiwe Sinodumo Nkosi. Before we get to introductions, good people, and knowing who you are, and our viewers, our listeners rather, engaging what you're about, we have a new segment on this here podcast called Did You Know?, where we engage an interesting fact about the education system. And today's Did You Know? Luna and Letty, listen up. The origin of the modern school uniform can be traced to the 16th century England, when the impoverished charity children attending the Christ Hospital boarding school wore blue cloaks reminiscent of the cassocks worn by clergy, along with yellow stockings. So, what do you guys think about the concept of school uniforms? I mean, we're talking 16th century England here. And a lot of people have the best memories, some the worst memories of being in school uniforms. Luna, are these things still relevant?
Personally, hi Matabo. Hello everyone. I don't think that uniforms are relevant anymore. I was so shocked to hear that your Did You Know referred to the 16th century. We're talking the year 1500 and something. That's hectic.
Yeah.
I don't think that uniforms are relevant. I do think that it's just one way to just force people to conform. I don't really believe in the arguments against, neatness and having this uniform image. Let us be individuals. Let us express our individualism. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, the conversation around this, the inception of it, is really to do away with class distinction, right? So we all dress the same way seems to be the logic behind the construct of the uniform. Letty, what are your thoughts?
In fact, that's exactly what I was thinking about after you posed the question. Because, when you consider the fact that many kids come from different households, right? So different incomes. And therefore, when kids now come to school wearing their own home clothes, it's very evident to see, which kind of household you come from. I mean, I know back in my days in primary school, when it was series days, right, we had to wear your own clothes. There was this whole competition amongst my peers about who you wear the latest brand. And when you consider nowadays, where kids are so aware of different ways to signal wealth, different ways to signal kind of households they come from in terms of income, it becomes such an unnecessary pressure for young people to now think, oh man, I don't come from a household where we can afford certain clothes. So a uniform helps kind of level the play field. And I hear Luna's point about, putting kids in a box and making them conform, but I think there are other ways in which kids can express their individuality while still wearing the uniform.
Because a lot of the uniform, as I see it and how I've experienced it, is very much a means of reinforcing gender expectations. But also above that, the irony, there was a conversation in 2022 where parents, particularly who are parents to children in private schools, were speaking about the economic burden of having to buy this specific kind of uniform that you can't even find an economically find other alternatives to where you can buy the school uniform. So the uniform shop is on the school grounds. It's super expensive. I think the conversation around uniform, especially in a country such as South Africa, dealing with the economic issues that we do have, but also dealing with gender norms and how they manifest, reinforced, and even in certain instances given room to thrive and shine, are given in South Africa. Did you enjoy yourself in school uniform, Netu?
you know what? I endured. So it was not a matter of enjoying. I made it work. I really just had to make it work for myself.
Yeah. Luna, did you enjoy yourself in school uniform?
I did, but only because the school that I attended, especially the high school, wore three of my favorite colors. Yeah.
Oh, do you know what I'm saying? When we get it right, it works. But Tuna, let us know how you feel about the issue around school uniforms. Did you enjoy yourself being in school uniform? What are your thoughts around the concept of school uniforms? And engage us on our social media networks. Now we are getting to the meat of the issue this year. On this year podcast, we are reflecting on SoNA 2023. And for the benefit of those who do not know what the State of the Nation address is, to be honest, when I first came across the concept in my early teens, I knew that there was a thing called SoNA, not really understanding what it means. And also when we understand what this thing is, we can situate our expectations well when we understand what it is that we're engaging. So the State of the Nation address is one of the most important annual events in the parliamentary calendar. So there are four key areas that are engaged here. The president delivers a speech focusing on the plans of government for the coming years. So it is a strategic output that is shared with us. This speech is delivered to Parliament, a joint sitting of the National Assembly. It is commonly known as the opening of Parliament. And fourth, all three arms of the state, namely legislature, executive, judiciary, attend the national event. So Silapha Betunani speaking around the State of the Nation address as it relates to the education question. But I'm sure you're asking yourselves, well, who are we engaging this year on this year podcast? And we have Uletiwe Sinotumo. Uletiwe, introduce yourself. Who are you, where are you from, and who are you representing on our podcast today?
Thank you so much for having me. So I am part of the Youth Capital team. I'm a network mobilizer at Youth Capital. Youth Capital is an advocacy campaign looking at the issue of youth unemployment. We advocate for solutions to youth unemployment that are grounded in young people's lived experience as well as evidence. So we're very much interested in hearing from young people, making sure that their lived experiences are an integral part of the solutions that are created to solve youth unemployment.
Thank you so much for that. Luna August, Candidate Fellow, Jakes Chaval Fellowship. Tell us, what is it that you are up to, what you are about, where you're from?
Cool. So I am a newly qualified teacher. I am a JGF Candidate Fellow, as you have introduced. I am a FET drama and music teacher. And I teach at the African School for Excellence all the way in Tsakani. That is what I am busy with. That is my day-to-days at the moment. What I'm about inclusive teaching. I am about expressing yourself in the classroom. I am about empathy. I'm about curriculum redesign. And I'm about arts integration in education. That's what I'm about.
And as you all know, and if you don't know, JGF is proud to partner with innovative thinkers such as Luna and to have them in conversation with experts who are on the ground doing the work of addressing issues of education within South Africa, rather. Thank you so much for joining us, team. So the first question. We all engaged SoNA, 9th of February, 2023. What were your first impressions of the address as it relates to the education question? Luna?
For me, it brought about some concerns. I think that primarily it is a very difficult time to be a teacher. When you think about education, I think of education as having to respond to the needs of a changing society. But listening to SoNA, and I suppose SoNA as a whole, my question was, are we as a nation capacitated to even respond to the needs of a changing society?
So what were the needs that you picked up were prevalent from the president's point of view?
So I think about preparing learners, students for economic readiness, for workplace readiness. And I think of what kind of skills need to be cultivated in the classroom for true workplace readiness. And when we're talking about when I speak about the future of a changing society, or the needs of a changing society, I am referring to, future skills, the skills that that students need once they leave school. And does the classroom prepare them for that at the moment? Yeah.
Letty, we were speaking about the skills pipeline before coming live on the podcast. With what Luna is speaking about, what were your expectations of how the education question should have been engaged at the State of the Nation address?
I definitely echo what Luna just said about, the president not articulating the link between the skills that young people acquire at an institution, an education institution, and the skills required in the market. What we were hoping to hear was a clear articulation in terms of how the TVET colleges, for example, capacitated to give young people the required skills in the market. The president made mention of the just transition, right, which entails different industries, particularly looks at jobs in the green economy. And yet the question is, are TVET colleges capacitated to give young people the necessary skills for them to be part of that that just transition? And I think also the question is, what are the different jobs that will be needed in the future? So just a clear articulation of these are the kind of jobs that we will need, and therefore this is what we're doing to ensure that our education institutions are capacitated to provide those skills, so that young people don't, leave a place of learning with a certificate that will not lead to them actually being employed. Another thing to add, there was a strong emphasis on enrollment. So the president spoke about the target of artisans that they'd like enrolled in TVET colleges, and we applaud to that target. However, what the president did not take into account in his address is the fact that young people don't even get to write the exam. An article came out just before the State of the Nation address that speaks about the fact that in the 22 examinations, there was a 4% decrease of young people who wrote the end-of-year examination. So what that tells us is, yes, young people may enroll to study at a TVET college and hopefully get the skills needed in the market, but they don't actually get to finish. And so we need to also look at supporting young people who go to education institutions to actually finish their education, leave the education with a qualification that will open the door for them in the world of work.
So looking at the 2023 Reading Panel report, it reports that 82% of South African grade 4 children do not read for meaning. And if we also understand how the education flow from basic education all the way to higher education, the number of students you start with in grade 1 are not it's not the same number of people that you end up with in matric. So if by grade 4 individuals aren't reading for meaning, what does it mean for people engaging the labor market, Letiwe?
So what ends up happening, and in fact there's a sister organization called Zero Dropout Campaign, and they look at young people who drop out of school due to pull and push factors, as they call them. And one of the push factors is when a young person is discouraged by the academic performance. So if a young person realizes that I'm not able to cope at school, I'm unable to follow what's being taught in the classroom, and they become discouraged and then leave school, right? And then they become part of the cohort of young people who are not in employment, education, or training. At the moment, we're sitting with 9.1 million young people who are not in education, employment, or training. And so what we need to really look at is, how do we support young people to stay at school, finish their education, so that they can get the qualification they can use to further their education, go to a place of training, or find employment, as opposed to not supporting them and find ourselves in a situation where young people have left school because they were discouraged by the, academic performance because they didn't feel confident in doing the work, and then now are not able to get training because they don't have the qualification that will enable them to get the training they need to find at least an entry-level job.
So the quote, the quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers, is one that rings true with the ethics, with the outlook of our organization, Jakes Chaval Fellowship. And I want to pass this next question over to you, Luna, because Letiwe speaks at length about how, the number of students engaging in the system decreases because of push and pull factors, and one of those being quality of performance. And obviously, well that the quality of performance of children in the classroom does relate to how they are engaged in the teaching and learning environment. So now we're looking at teachers. When I look at the address, I see that there is an articulation that there is a problem, but a more nuanced understanding of teacher training within the system, and getting the best teachers in classrooms doing the work. As a newly qualified teacher, Luna, being in the field, what do you feel are the main struggles that teachers are engaging right now? And do you feel that there is any cognizance around supporting teachers within the field?
Thanks, Matabo. I think that one of the biggest challenges that I'm particularly facing as a newly qualified teacher is the issue of pacing the curriculum, timing the curriculum, but also having to do classroom management, having to instill some kind of behavioral expectations, but then also having to deal with this shortfall in reading and literacy development that far precedes them getting to high school. You mentioned that high percentage of learners that can't read meaningfully or read for comprehension by the time they reach grade 4. That issue is something that I deal with in my classroom, that I think many teachers deal with in their classroom. When we look at a day-to-day is engaging with the textbook, a textbook for any subject. How confident are we that, a child is fully understanding what is happening in that textbook? The textbook does a great job of throwing terminology at us, but can a child fully comprehend that terminology? When we look at exams and assessments as benchmarkers of progress and of excellence, the same literacy development, the same reading for meaning, for comprehension is applicable to when a child answers that question paper. Does a child understand what it means to compare, to contrast, to evaluate, to describe? Those kind of things. I think that the reading challenge, or the reading for meaning challenge, that issue that we face, is something that is affecting me as an NQT at the moment. And I think that this problem is universal throughout a lot of teachers.
Yeah, so Luna speaking about the issue of children engaging with a critical thinking muscle, right? And that not being developed and jogged in a way that's necessary. Good people, 250 million rand is given to the education sector. It is used majority towards paying of teacher salaries. If you were given the opportunity to advise the president as to how this huge chunk, a lion's share of government spending or government spend is used in this one department, what are the areas of impact do you think are priority looking where we are now? COVID-19, which took us out of action for 2 years, has set back the classroom by 10 years, our current statistics. What are the interventions, in your view, Letiwe and Luna, should be prioritized to meet the key areas of engagement that you feel need to be engaged right now? We'll start with you, Letiwe.
I think I want to highlight 3 points. I think the first one speaks to the point around supporting teachers, supporting teachers and them being able to teach learners, because also something to highlight in terms of the support that teachers need is the ratio of teacher to student in a classroom, right? We know that we have classrooms that have many students and yet there's only one teacher to teach those many students. And so I would like to see a better strategy on terms of how do we use some of the money allocated to education to ensure that teacher assistants are able to stay in schools longer than the year period, because we know the teacher assistant program that the president briefly spoke on, as evidence of jobs created for young people by the government. But we know that opportunity is a very short-term opportunity. But what if we were to extend the period that a young person is a teacher assistant in the classroom to really enable the teacher to give the attention needed to as many students as possible? And then the second thing, which I think links to supporting the teacher, is around tracking students. I will go back to the point I made earlier that we find that many young people may drop out of school because of poor academic performance or their lack of confidence in their academic abilities, right? And with that in mind, we need to track who are the young people that are leaving school, make sure that before they even leave school, they are engaged, right? So money needs to be spent in tracking systems to ensure that young people are able to stay in school. I mean, the one key way in which young people are tracked is through school registers, but maybe through the funds given, other systems, other means can be created to ensure that we are tracking learners and we are picking up on any signals that they may drop out of school. And then the last thing I'd say is, giving money towards the Second Chance Matric program. Now, it's a program created by the Department of Basic Education. It's meant to enable young people who do not pass Matric the first time around, or pass Matric but not with the grades that they need in order to apply at a tertiary institution, for them to rewrite again. We hear from many young people as Youth Capital that, they need support in preparing for that Matric, to rewrite that Matric exam. We know that there are centres, but those centres need support. And so money could be allocated to those centres so that young people who go and prepare to rewrite their Matric find resources that they need to prepare for the exam. Because on the note of resources, we know that most of the young people come from schools where they used to provide textbooks. So when a young person who does not pass Matric the first time now needs to prepare to rewrite their Matric, they don't have access to those textbooks and they're not at that school anymore. So they go to the centres. But if those centres are not well resourced, then, they find themselves in a position where they're not as prepared as they'd like to be. So I would like to see some of the money allocated to the education sector given to the centres that are there to help young people prepare to rewrite their Matric exam. So those would be my 3 suggestions. Just to recap: 1, support, make sure that teacher assistants can stay in schools, and support teachers to allocate funds to support ways of tracking young people so that they don't drop out of school. And then thirdly, money allocated to centres that are there to support young people prepare to rewrite their Matric exam.
On your third point, I would also imagine that the campaign to destigmatize the rewriting experience, right? Because also going to these centers and you find that there aren't any textbooks, that in and of itself, and knowing that you're in that space, that in and of itself does something to you psychologically, right? It's a kind of a reminder of a quote-unquote failure, as opposed to it being presented as an opportunity to start again. So thank you so much for those points. Letua mentions having teacher assistants stay longer in schools. Luna, as a person who has been mentored within the education space, you've shadowed a professional within the space. What are your thoughts before getting into your recommendations? What are your thoughts on Letiwa's point there?
And this is specifically the point on the teaching assistants. Yes, I think that that would definitely help in terms of assisting with the classroom management side of things, assist with facilitating kids to work independently, and I suppose leaves more time to the lead teacher to actually teach. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So then, with your recommendations, what are your thoughts that you would share to the president in terms of how to address the education disarray with the 250 rand budget in mind?
I would say that
250 million, rather.
I would say that Mr. President, it's time to relook teacher development and what initial teacher education looks like. With the way that the world economy is headed, I do recognize the attempts, particularly as outlined in the State of a Nation address, to strengthen and to build our economy. But as it pertains to teacher development, what needs to change is the way in which initial teacher education takes place, or the kind of skills that we are imparted with. Are we as teachers capacitated to are we as teachers capacitated to prepare children for the future? Teachers need to be developed with an entrepreneurial type of mindset, also a kind of mindset that activates agency within students, but also within themselves. I was actually reading parts of a book called Edupreneur. I can't fully remember who the two authors are, but in that book, they make it very apparent that the key to turning around education and possibly turning around schools and failing schools is teacher-led innovation. So how do we capacitate teachers to have that entrepreneurial and innovative mindset so that they can actually, change their classroom conditions? So I'm saying, Mr. President, look at how initial teacher education looks and ensure that teachers are equipped and capacitated to please relook at how initial teacher education looks, and ensure that in initial teacher education, we are able to respond to the needs of the changing society.
And speaking about changing society and equipping teachers, the issue of the digital divide in this country, specifically within the education system, the president lauded an 80% matric pass rate, and ours is to investigate who is the majority of the 80%, right? And the people who really benefit within the system and in this changing world which moves towards digital education are individuals who are in private schools, right? Now they have the comfort of engaging the resources that are readily available to them, and teachers who are themselves familiar with the resources at hand. In your view, Letiwe, when we look at the digital divide and the digital economy, how the classroom then situates itself, how the teaching and learning experience situates itself within the digital divide, what are your thoughts, or what have been the experiences of young people who have been left behind and now as a result of that are unemployed?
The digital divide was amplified during the COVID period, particularly during lockdown, where there was a push for online learning, where young people were introduced to this method of learning from home using devices, etc. And from our engagements with young people during that time, we heard them say that it's a struggle. We heard young people talk about needing to teach elderly people in their homes, right, who are the breadwinners. So ugogo endlini, now having to teach the child in the home how to learn using WhatsApp, or to go through these lessons through a device. And we saw then that there's definitely a digital divide. There's definitely a misalignment between the use of digital resources and the kind of households that young people come from, particularly public schools, and people that go to public schools. But also in the same breath, we heard young people find innovative ways to still continue learning. And WhatsApp became a big resource for many households. Households where young people that we were talking to come from, right? So they were like, okay, we cannot use a tablet, we cannot go on, we cannot go on the website to do learning, but we can use WhatsApp. So maybe we can find ways of summarizing what's on a site in a WhatsApp message. So WhatsApp groups were created with parents to help parents teach their kids. And so I think what we need to do when we start thinking about going the digital route is understanding the experiences of people that will be expected to use and understanding what then can they use, what is accessible to them. And if we find that WhatsApp, for example, is a tool that is familiar to them, let's use that. Let's not be too advanced in our innovation that we leave people behind. Let's innovate with the people. Let's innovate with parents. Let's innovate with young people so that what we design, the tools, the digital tools that we design correlate with the experiences of young people that need to use those tools.
And also the economic capacity of these individuals, because there's a great assumption that people have devices that can connect them with various social media platforms where they can get in touch, connected and informed on what's happening.
Can I add one other point? An important point to highlight, just listening to what you're saying, is the need to also ensure that there's a infrastructure that is conducive.
Yeah.
So, many young people that we spoke to during the lockdown time, particularly university students, they would tell us about needing to go to a mountain to pick up on a signal because the tower's not working. Right? And so, as we are moving towards this digital world, this digital way of living, let us make sure that we have a conducive infrastructure that allows for that to happen. If people do not have working towers, if people don't have electricity, then there's no point in being so steadfast in trying to be digital when the infrastructure is not there.
Yeah. Luna, we're speaking about the consequence of being left behind as it relates to the experiences of young people and how it is inevitable, and it is actually harrowing to think that because of the digital divide, the inevitable result is young people being unemployed because they don't have access to information. Being in the schooling system, seeing colleagues who may themselves have been left behind within the digital space. We have an assumption that teachers know what to do, but seeing from 2020, a lot of teachers did not have capacity to engage these innovative spaces. How has it been experiencing the classroom now, quote unquote, post COVID-19?
So the school that I teach at has, ironically, during the COVID period, had Sorry, I'm going to restart that echo really set me off.
Should I repeat the question
no,
for
I'm
you?
good.
I can repeat
Okay,
the
actually,
question.
you could, please.
Okay. So, wait. Letiwe speaks about the impact of young people being left behind as a result of the digital divide. And the question around the digital divide seems to really lean onto young people, rightfully so. But we never take the opportunity to think of teachers who themselves in their practice have been left behind due to the digital divide. How is it experiencing the classroom, possibly with colleagues who themselves are still orientating themselves 2 to 3 years later within this COVID era that we are in?
So ironically, during the COVID period, there has been an uptake in, I suppose, the quality of teaching and learning at the school that I teach at because of access to digitally enabled education. And with that has come the necessary professional development for the teachers to be able to undertake, use of whatever app was put before us. I do think, though, that the digital divide, and Letiwe, I'm pronouncing your name correctly, I hope, yes? That started
Yes.
is the infrastructure thing. We are experiencing, big bouts of load shedding. in the country. And with that, it's not just, a thing of charging devices or not being able to keep the devices on, but it's even then not being able to connect to secondary data points, whether it's Wi-Fi being down or there just being a total network outage. It kind of makes it impossible when a curriculum requires you or requires children to research something that's technically not in a book. It's difficult with the lack of electricity to facilitate access to information.
Yeah. And as we were all speaking, and when I was engaging the document itself, the State of the Nation address, that is, it almost feels that a lot of these interventions are being made in isolation. So we speak about the education question without considering the impact of load shedding and what it does to education, right? We speak about the issue of crime in a community and not understanding the impact of crime as it relates to schools functioning peacefully and functioning in a way that it should function. And in my closing is, how do you see the State of the Nation address also being reflective of how it is that we operate in this country when trying to come to solutions and getting to these solutions in silos? Lethiwe, what are your thoughts around that?
The practice of working in silos is definitely prevalent in how our government is structured, how our government works, right? But I think it also is seen in just how organizations work. And as Youth Capital, as a campaign, we strive to coordinate, right? We strive to convene different stakeholders, bring them into one room and say, wait a minute, Department of Education, you need to speak to Department of Labor. You need to speak to Department of Social Development, right? You need to speak to each other because the work that you do actually affects, each other. Like what you do in education, a young person needs support in order to go to school. So Department of Social Development needs to work with education to make sure the young person is in a household where they feel supported and able to go to school. But also Labor needs to say, these are the jobs that a young person can apply for when they've completed their education. And so as a campaign, we really call for a coordinated approach in solving the very main issues that we have as a country. We create spaces where different stakeholders can come together. And in conclusion, it's our call as a campaign that we shouldn't work in silos. So I really urge even organizations to work together, to collaborate. And I really love that we're having this conversation, right? Two organizations having a conversation, as well as a young teacher having this conversation, showing that it is possible for people from different sort of points of view to come together because they have a common goal of making South Africa work for young people.
Having a South Africa that works for young people. Luna, your impressions of how our state is operating effectively in silos, in addressing issues that have almost an interdisciplinary need in addressing the issues at hand.
There are two
What are your
things
thoughts?
that I want to highlight here. The first thing is that I don't think that we have a proactive nation or a government. I do think that our government tends to be on the reactive side, which of course is why we hear about, a lot of emergency interventions or emergency things that government needed to implement in order to respond to a certain problem. And then the second point that I wanted to raise is something that Lethiwe mentioned. It's around innovating with people. And this goes down to, I suppose, empathy and justice. It's something called justice-based design. Innovating and designing with and not for we need to, I know that we are a democratic state and we exercise our democracy through voting, but that democracy needs to extend by actually having all stakeholders at every table, if that makes sense.
Oh, 1,000%, 1,000%. I mean, that's the cornerstone of effective mobilization. You're doing with and you're not doing for. And in that way, you're eliminating issues of, savior complex. You're eliminating issues of creating imbalanced power dynamics. Because in hierarchy, right? Because it is the people in the context that know how to articulate the issue and who may have the solutions within themselves. And all they really need are resources, which you can then supply. Good people, we know that we are a teaching fellowship, and it would be remiss for us not to continue the mindset, the philosophy, and the campaign, which is be a teacher. Letiwe, working where you work, where your hands capture the minds of young people post-basic education. In the work that you do, why do you feel that it is important to have well-trained teachers? And second to that, someone is sitting at home and thinking, oh, should I be a teacher? Shouldn't I be a teacher? What is the importance of having people who are proactively going within the field from a place of conviction, from a place of innovation, from a place of, quoting you, doing the work?
It's a generational thing, right? It's important to have good teachers because it's not just about the current generation. It's about the future generation as well. Working with young people, I hear them express aspirations to be in government one day. So they see themselves as the future leaders. And I imagine having a teacher that can instill that in the young mind, helping them see the role that they can play in the future. So I definitely encourage young people to pursue the teaching profession because you are sowing seeds. You're sowing seeds for future generations. Yes, it may not look like the work you're doing, is going to yield the results that you want to see, but trust me, in years to come, you'll see the fruits of your labor. So I really encourage a young person sitting at home contemplating, should I do this or should I not? I would say by all means do it. If you feel called to be a teacher, pursue that calling. Because when you do pursue it, you will be sowing seeds into the lives of our future leaders.
It's all about playing the long game, according to Letiwe. Luna, you are in the classroom. You are currently tuning in from the institution of learning that you are currently practicing at. Why is it important to have excellent teachers in the classroom? Why shouldn't we take this thing lightly? And second to that, someone's listening at home. Luna, I want to be a teacher. I'm not sure. I'm here, there, and everywhere, but I feel called to this. Encourage our listener who's in that predicament.
So I want to say that it's important to have well-trained, resilient, well-rounded teachers. But I want to highlight this thing of specifically having specialist teachers or teachers as content specialists. Because when you as a teacher are absolutely confident about what you are teaching, you would be able to provide, I suppose, a high level of teaching and learning experience. I think that it's important to have well-trained teachers, to have teachers as who are content specialists. There's a level of confidence that comes with knowing the content that you are teaching, that being a specialist in the subject. There's a level of confidence that comes with being a specialist in the subject that you are teaching, because it means that you can then be more responsive to the needs of teaching and learning in your classroom. That's just from the content point of view. If you look at, teacher development from a resilience point of view, from a future skills point of view, I think that there is something so cathartic in being in the classroom, in some way contributing towards the development of another being. And it's absolutely worth it when a child responds to an invitation that you set with them when you met them, that come and speak to me, at any time. When a child actually responds to that, when a child actually takes up that offer, it's very, very, very cathartic. That is my why. I am here for the development of people, and I would appeal to anyone who has that inclination to consider being in the classroom.
You heard it from Luna and Uletiwe. And to continue the conversation around the State of the Nation address, and also the campaign, the conviction of being a teacher in South Africa, do engage us on our social media networks. It is Jake's Chaval Fellowship on your favorite search engine. You'll find our website there, and you'll find all of our social media there as well. We are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, and we are on Instagram. So I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of our fellowship to thank both Uletiwe and to thank Luna. Letiwe, how do people get a hold of Youth Capital, and how do they get a hold of you personally as well?
Awesome. So we are also on all the social media platforms. We are Youth Capital SA on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So please do check us out. You follow us, you DM us. But we also have a WhatsApp line. Our WhatsApp number is 083 973 6642. That is 083 973 6642. And I am Sino Umbono on Twitter, so you can find me there.
Lovely stuff, lovely stuff. Luna, how do people get a hold of you and connect with you and courageously collaborate
So I'm
with you?
available through 2 platforms at the moment. I welcome any follows on Instagram. My handle is at Luna Mayo Sandwiches. Pick up tuna, but Luna. And and I'm also on Twitter. The handle is at Pedagogic Luna. If you go and engage with my tweets, I do engage quite frequently in the teaching and learning space, not just necessarily in basic education, but in the field of curriculum design as well, and also technological advancements in education. I've been quite vocal regarding artificial intelligence and its use in the classroom.
Thank you so much, Luna. Thank you so much. And to you, our listeners, this is a 3-part series. We engage the youth perspective. We have part 2 and part 3. I ain't going to say nothing about our next guest. You guys need to engage the podcast. We know very well that you will enjoy it. From me, Mata Wutladi, I'll see you on the other side of this. Bye.